Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going up? What's going on, dude?
Lots of stuff going on, lots of stuff going up. I mean, if you look at things going up last night, the scoreboard for the Philadelphia Flyers, right?
Yes.
It was going up, a lot progressively throughout the game. Flyers beat the Ducks 6-0. Obviously,
Pants off the Ducks.
yeah, and the Cutter Gauthier, I don't want to say return game because he never really ever came to Philly before and played a game, but Cutter Gauthier's debut, I guess, at the Wells Fargo Center. And the Flyers, with that 6-0 win and really drubbing of the Ducks, that's their biggest win in goal differential in the last 7 years, which is crazy to think about. Yeah. How you doing, brother, after that win last night?
It was great, man. Obviously, we were texting during the game and talking about the show. And, for those listening, obviously we're doing this on a different schedules because I fly out to Israel tomorrow. So we wanted to make sure we had an episode for this week. So, and we thought this was kind of perfect anyway. That game was fantastic to watch. It literally couldn't have gone any better than we were hoping for. And, it's kind of like we were saying about guys who do what Gauthier did and how rarely that actually pans out for the player to do that and to not be humble about the position that you're in and to take that egotistical attitude, because that's what it was. And it's not just that he didn't want to play here, it's the way he went about it.
Yeah, exactly.
To make that clear.
And also he hasn't really even stated what the reason was for leaving, and that whole, I guess, inability to actually state what it was leads me to believe that it was due to egotistical reasons.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, even if the Flyers did screw up in between management or there was something he didn't like, the lack of communication from a guy with no NHL reputation to refuse to talk to people, for the team to send people out to talk to you, and you're not even wanting to give them the time of day. You asked for this.
Yeah, it's warranted, right? Like all the fuck you cutters, I think, right off the bat, and all that stuff from the fans and the love he received from the fans in quotations there, all well deserved.
Yeah. So, okay, before we get into it, because we're already starting, let me do the usual spiel. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you're listening right now and you are not subscribed or you did not like the video, please do so. It is the best way to support our podcast. Also, hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified when we release episodes in case we do random stuff to you like this and release it on an off day. And our schedule probably for the next month and a half will be mixed up. It will not be as consistent as it has been, but we will still be doing an episode a week for sure. So definitely make sure to use the bell to get notified when we release episodes. And also for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating there as well. That is also a great way to support this show. And also a shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's, something they definitely don't serve in Israel. No cheese and meat there. But they have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to go check out Jim's Steaks at 4th and South. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Use them as your arm to operate with the insurance companies. They will handle all of the annoying processes of dealing with insurance claims and all the paperwork and everything that kind of makes the process more frustrating than it should be. Summit Public Adjusters will be there to help you. Again, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. The link is in the description. Again, they are our partners. Our stuff is pinned at the top. So definitely go and support SportsSpider.com. They also have other sports content on there beyond hockey.
Lots of cool stuff on Sports Spider, so check it out, everybody.
For sure. All right, so we're going to mostly talk about the game from last night. We do have some other topics to talk about, but and a lot of the topics kind of surround stuff, but this is the big news of the day. Obviously, It was a very exciting game. I guess the piece of news going into the game is that Joel Farabee was benched for Ule Lixell. A decision that I don't think came lightly. I don't think necessarily Joel Farabee played like awful or anything like that to deserve a benching, but his offensive output has definitely stagnated just this whole season. Even if he looked good and was getting incredibly unlucky, eventually something's got to give. And there are other players on this team that have been benched for similar reasons. So this could end up being a good thing in the end. I do wonder if he will be benched another game because of the success the team had. I don't think it was necessarily attributed to Lixell, though he played okay. Not his best game, but he was fine in the game. I don't love the idea of putting Lixell with Michkov, to be honest with you. But overall, the team played excellent, so I could see that. Farabee might have needed a reset, though. I'm sure it's a game he would have wanted to be in. The team was clearly very up for this game, regardless of what Tortorella said publicly. But yeah, Joel Farabee sits his first game out of the season. I think it broke a streak of 200 something.
15 games consecutively for him.
Yeah. So he led the team, I think, in consecutive games up until recently.
I believe so, something like
and now that. Lawton is the guy, if I remember.
I'm not 100% on who takes over there, but in terms of Farabee just being scratched and Lixell coming in, I think it's more to do with Farabee and just his recent play, as you said, right? Like, I don't think he's played bad necessarily, and he's sticking up for his teammates. Like, we saw him fight Connor Dewar against the Leafs, and we know how much Tortorella is, appreciative of that type of physicality and kind of getting your team into the mix, bringing the team into the fight and things like that. I just think they do expect more from him offensively. And when you're paying a guy $5 million like that, and he really hasn't produced too much for you this season, it's just inevitable. And I do think it's a bit of a message more to him specifically. I wouldn't say the team, but more just to him that, hey, like, we're expecting more from you. In 42 games, he's got 14 points. So I think this is more like a wake up call in the sense like, hey, we know you've been playing well. You have been driving play in certain scenarios, when you've been playing this season with different, subsets of line mates and things like that. But 14 points in 42 games, I think we all know that Joel Farabee can do better than that offensively at this point in his career. So I think it's more of just a wake up call, maybe to get him going, right? Like, sit down in probably one of the most anticipated games of the season for this team. And if that doesn't wake him up, what else will offensively? So I think it's a great tool actually to use in kind of this scenario going into this game. But the team, like, just in terms of the 6-0 win, right? Like, they dominated the Ducks, and I don't even stress the word dominated enough. Like, they decimated them. It was a complete victory for the Flyers, probably one of their only complete victories this season. There's a few other games where they played really well, but this is probably one of, if not their most complete game, in my opinion.
It seems like the most complete game they played since they beat Dallas last season.
Yeah.
Where I think the score was 5-1 or something like that in the end. I can't remember the exact score. It might have even been a shutout as well, but it was just...
The game they beat Tampa, I thought, was really good with Fedotov in there, but, obviously it's not the same type of game, right? Like, it's an actual close game. This is kind of just a game where you're running away with it over a team that's significantly weaker than you, right? That you should beat, essentially.
Yeah, and they were good in all aspects of the game. They obviously didn't give up a power play goal. They scored a couple power play goals. They earned a shutout in the game. They had several players. We're going to go into this in detail who broke scoring stretches, scoring slumps. It was a complete game. Like you said, it was the most complete game that they have had, in my opinion, this season. And definitely going back to last season, because last season they did have some excellent games. This season, they've had some good performances, but not excellent games. Yeah. And while the Ducks are not a great team, they made the Ducks look completely inferior. And I will say this, the Flyers have not had much trouble against bad teams this year. It's against the good teams that they've struggled considerably. Like, that's when you're kind of like, oh, they are not a playoff team. But when they are playing teams that are in their range, outside of maybe the Pittsburgh game, and I think maybe they had a bad game against Columbus, primarily when they're playing kind of these bad teams like Chicago, San Jose, the Ducks, they really have no problem with them, which shows that they are underachieving this year, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say that I agree in terms of like just these types of games and the competition. Usually this season, when they've been pitted off against inferior competition, they have been a lot more successful. Like look at the game previously against the Ducks just a little bit ago. They beat them. Look at San Jose this year. They beat them twice. A lot of inferior opponents. Even Columbus, they had a big blowout win against them at some point this season. So there's been a lot of teams that have been on paper projected to be worse than them, that they've kind of been able to not decimate, but just been able to dictate play against, right? And if you look at this game against the Ducks, there's no doubt about it that the Flyers did dictate the play. Like just looking at the scoring chance creation battle, right? Philadelphia creates 28 scoring chances to Anaheim's 19, and the majority of Anaheim's chances actually come in that third period, which is to be expected, right? Like Flyers are going into that period with a huge lead. Maybe the team losing has a little bit of a push, but even then, right? Like the Flyers outchanced them significantly. And the key thing really is the quality chances and the quality chance output, right? Like Philadelphia puts 10 high danger chances up and Anaheim only with 5. So you're significantly outchancing them from a high danger quality perspective, and that's showing on the scoreboard, right? The Flyers are getting to those areas that you need to get to score and to create chances, like typically around the net, things like that. Like if you look at just a lot of the things that they were doing, they were peppering, Anaheim's goaltender as well and Gibson, right? Like outshooting them 30-22 in this game. So just in terms of like the way they were playing, they looked like a very quick team. They were, moving the puck up ice pretty quickly and efficiently, and that was leading into their offense. But it's definitely a win that's important for this team, especially probably in one of their most important games of the season, considering the circumstances with Gauthier. But you also have to look at the standings, right? Like the Flyers are coming in off a 4-game losing streak. Right now they have 41 points. I believe they're like at this point 5 to 6 points back of a wild card spot. So right now they are, 41 points. They're 5 points back of Columbus at 46. Like this was a crucial win for them if they want to stay anywhere in like wild card playoff contention too.
Yeah.
So not just the Gauthier aspect, but like this was a win that was needed because of that too, because they want to obviously throw all the bullshit in his face that this guy, essentially did, denying being a Flyer and wanting to move on. But it's also a win that's needed just for, this hockey team in general, right? Like 4 straight losses when arguably they could have won a lot of those games coming off that road trip. So this is a much needed win for them to kind of gain confidence and hopefully get on, a winning streak to go ahead here. I said a lot of stuff there, so
no. All well said, and I think the confidence thing is huge. It did feel like, again, like when Michkov scored his goal, like he wasn't having a bad game or anything like that. He was getting some opportunities, but you saw he just started firing the puck from everywhere after he scored that goal. Like it revitalized him. Again, it's easy to forget that he's only 20 years old. He obviously has been struggling offensively. I think he has like 3 points over the last like 14 games or something like that, which is a far cry from being over a point a game or a point a game player, which he was prior to that. So he definitely needed that goal, and obviously maybe Drysdale's best game as a Flyer. Let's actually talk about Jamie Drysdale right now, and I want to get let me say this first. This game's theme was all about bullying Cutter Gauthier. Yeah. And I don't think it was necessarily the players that went into it with that mindset, but the crowd definitely did. There were reports that people were trying to bring signs in, and some of them were that they were getting confiscated. But the team definitely fed into that. Like I think they were very well aware of what Cutter did. I think they also understand it's a business, and they're probably like, all right, well, we're just going to move forward. But I think when they see the way the crowd started bullying Cutter, and I think they rode that. Like they
fed off that energy 100%. It was a
playoff-like atmosphere behind them. And I talk about that all the time, how our energy towards the team does affect them. It won't help them win a Stanley Cup, but it can be a somewhat of a difference maker.
Well, think about how much that fired them up in that scenario, especially when you look at Drysdale, right? Like he obviously is in a situation where he was the piece that came back for Gauthier. Yeah. So he's technically on this type of night, he's almost like a side character, but he is also really involved in this because, at the end of the day, when somebody judges this trade in 10, 20 years, they're going to be looking at, okay, which player performed for what team? What was it? Cutter Gauthier had a better performance over his career for Anaheim, or was it going to be Jamie Drysdale? So he's very much, a part of this story. And in terms of how he reacted to the energy, I think he really fed off it, right? He had one of his best games and one of his better games. He was really noticeable, just with his skating in general. Obviously gets that power play goal, super early into the game, kind of puts the Flyers up 2-0, and then really from there they're just rolling and there's no looking back. And I think it's important to note, like, the opposite happens for Gauthier, right? Like, look at a really, like, I would say, like, a really huge, like, wrestling heel. Let's go to wrestling or something, right? Like, look, if you're a villain, sometimes if you're in that villain character, like, you can feed off, like, negative energy and turn it and channel that into something and use that as motivation.
Crosby does that to us every time.
Exactly, right? Like, look at Crosby. The fans boo him to shit. And
he makes always him play better.
He always has a huge game. I think he's the most points scored ever against the Flyers of any single player in NHL history. So it just proves the point that you can channel that energy and use it as motivation. Cutter Gauthier did not channel that energy and use it as motivation in this one.
Understandably so. He's a kid.
No, of course. But I think that just says, if you're like a fan looking at this, or if you're even like the Flyers brass looking at this, I would want a guy that gets fired up and gets motivated to be like, no, like, I made the right decision. Like, I'm going to come in this game and have an impact. And he was, not impactful whatsoever. So I would just say that if you're looking at the trade just off the surface level, you have a guy in Jamie Drysdale in the situation who really showed up and rose to the occasion. And you have a guy in Cutter Gauthier who did the opposite of that and minimized himself on the ice and was not noticeable. So I just think if you're looking at it like from a overall perspective, the fact that a guy like Gauthier isn't responding like in any really manner and didn't really have an effect, would you really want a guy like that on your team to begin with, right? So I think that's something interesting to point out.
I think that's fair, but I do think there's the difference between positive and negative energy. Like, the crowd was behind Drysdale and the crowd was against Gauthier. I think it's a fair point. We don't I'm not going to sit here and say Gauthier is not going to have a good career, good to great career.
Because he might still. I won't discount the fact that on this podcast before we traded Gauthier before he was traded, I was a guy that was super high on him, and I still think he's super talented. I just think maybe some of that competitive drive that you need to succeed might not be there with him.
And Steve kind of warned us about that after his World Junior performance, where he led the team in points and the tournament in points, but he was like, he didn't play great. It was like a lot of secondary assists and stuff like that.
Coasting on skill, right?
Yeah, so I'm still not in the camp that thinking like Cutter's some kind of bust, and he hasn't performed like one either. I mean, he has a reasonable amount of points for a rookie of his style, but he's definitely not as tenacious as a guy can be with his size and skill set. Having said that, he's young and he falls in the same camp as a lot of other players. I do not think this game is going to define his career, but it definitely is a reminder of why you come into the league humble, why you don't do like Rutger McGroarty. How's he doing with the Penguins?
He's in the AHL, so
right. It's like this attitude of thinking that you're better than you are. That is like 1% of players who can really get away with doing that. And usually you need to really earn that type of reputation because you're walking into a league of super athletes where all of them were you. There are no guys playing in the NHL who were not the best players everywhere they went. Even Garrett Hathaway was, I guarantee you, the superstar his whole life until he got to the NHL, right? Like, these were all elite players at every level until they got to pro hockey. So it's like, you need to tone that stuff down. And this was like karma in a nutshell, and how it doesn't really pan out. So like the theme of the night was bullying Cutter Gauthier. Obviously the crowd was screaming, F you, Cutter. They were booing him every time he was on the ice. They were asking for more Cutter.
Chanting Jamie's better, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like Jamie was probably feeding off of that. And look, this game, if it went the opposite way, how people would have felt. Like if Cutter came in here, put up a goal and assist, and Jamie was a -1 or whatever. Right. But, on the opposite end, Jamie came in, 2-point night, goal and assist, a +1. He actually played second least of all defensemen in the game, but you wouldn't have even noticed because of how good his night was overall. And the way the team played in general was like, it was exactly what we needed. Because, remember we were talking about how I was like disappointed with the 4-0 win over San Jose because like I didn't feel like the team played as great as that score.
Yeah, they didn't really dominate that game. Whereas this is a 6-0 win where you can point to it objectively and say the Flyers dominated in all aspects. An easy way to look at it is just the expected goals for percentage. Like Philadelphia in this game had a 67.51 expected goals for percentage to Anaheim's 32.49 expected goals for percentage. So that just shows like throughout this game, in terms of just being on the ice, controlling the puck, controlling the, quality chance battle, and shot battle, the Flyers are doing that, in spades in this game. I mentioned earlier, right? Like that high danger chance metric, like 10 high danger chances to 5, out chancing them in those quality areas, and doubling them up there. That can't be overstated, right? Like when you create in those, key areas where the Flyers were going to front of the net, crashing the net, things like that. That's where you're really going to get a lot of your opportunities. And the Ducks didn't have that same energy really that the Flyers had. And I think the fans do play into that, right? The Flyers seemed fired up and they were really feeding off, what was happening and kind of the theme of the game, which was to bully Cutter Gauthier.
Yeah. And they got rewarded to it by the crowd, and I'm sure they see what's online today if they are spending time online, looking at what happened. Risto obviously checked Cutter, huge check during the game. TK said he'll fight him.
I'll fight him. It was so funny though, because like after Gauthier turns around, they like zoom into Konechny. He's just laughing.
He's like got a smirk on his face.
And I thought it was funny too, because they interviewed him and Konechny obviously on the Brox is like, we don't know this kid. We're just giving him a hard time. It's like something to rally around. But I think for this Flyers team, like a game like this actually does come at a perfect time just in their season, right? Because they've really been in a little bit of a spiral here in terms of where they were headed. As we can see, like 5 points out of a playoff spot just a couple games ago, that was only 2 points or 1 point, right? So to break the losing streak, to kind of get back on track after an abysmal performance against the Dallas Stars, when you were playing some really good hockey and not getting wins, I think this must feel good for this team, because they really were playing a lot of good hockey over this past month. And there's been a lot of scenarios and a lot of points left on the table where they probably should have had better outcomes but did not. So this is almost like, I think, a reward for some of that. And just to kind of end off, and we can move on to the next topic, the Flyers, I think this goes hand in hand perfectly, have a 59% expected goal share at 5-on-5 in the past month, and that's second highest in the NHL per Jay Fresh. So that just kind of leads.
That's the team from last year.
Yeah, exactly. That just kind of leads into what we're talking about, right? Like over this past month, having the second highest in the NHL expected goal share, 59%, like that's a crazy stat for a team that is almost like last in this conference, essentially, if you think about it, right? Like they haven't been getting the amount of wins you would think based on the way they've been playing. Like think about just like those 2 LA games they could have won, the game against Vegas, the 2 games against Toronto. Like just think about all those points, right? But the process has really been good. So I think just this Ducks game maybe can kind of reestablish that process for them and hopefully show them that, hey, if we do play this way, when we're taking on like inferior teams going up here, not these upper echelon teams, we might be able to really squeak out a lot more wins than we have been lately.
Yeah. And again, we have topics. We're kind of bouncing around a little bit here, but I don't really care. It does, what your comment kind of leads perfectly into this. And I think it was that last night's game was highlighted by Ersson's shutout, right? Like the last time he was getting healthy, he got injured, but he was on the brink of a shutout. Kolosov ended up finishing that game and earning the shutout in the end. So it was kind of like a 50-50 split on that one. This time Ersson saw it through, and like, look, it could have been a game where it would have been easy for him to kind of sit back and be like, we're dominating. But no, he wanted the shutout. You could like feel it. Like, I wouldn't say it out loud. I refused to write it into the show notes. I'm like, I'm not jinxing this. I waited till the game was over to write his shutout in there. And, he is so crucial to this team. And this is why it was a complete win. Like every element of the team played well. Ersson played well. And just pointing back to what you were just saying about the offense, that has kind of been like their crutch of late, is that like, yeah, they've been able to produce some offense and to drive play in the offensive zone and create chances, but their defense is not held up. Their goaltending is definitely not held up. And it kind of took all momentum away from the offense. It kind of created a complete wash of the fact that they were playing better offensively. Forget the fact that power play was still playing poorly. And I do want to talk about the power play. We're going to talk about that when we talk about Michkov. But, I think it was highlighted by Ersson's play.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I think Ersson, I mean, for his first game, essentially, or not first game back, but essentially second game back, taking on the Ducks, came back against Dallas. It's a good thing for him to get on the winning side, and also build some confidence here, right? Like you're coming back after essentially a shutout against the Sharks, stinker against the Stars. So it's a tough place to be at as a goalie who's constantly been getting injured this season. So for him to come in and just be that solid rock that the Flyers needed and give them the saves at the timely points, that's exactly what they needed, right? Like 22 saves for him. He didn't have the most high quality or high danger chances. It's not like the Ducks were peppering him or anything. Like we went over the high quality shot battle, the chance battle. The Flyers dominated this one. So it's not like he was needing to make 10 bellers every so often or any huge save, but he was just steady in there, giving them the saves that he needed, or giving the team the saves that they needed. And I do think like this is a game where who knows what happens if you get a Kolosov or Fedotov in there at that 2-0 mark. Like we've seen them let in like a soft goal periodically, each of them in every game these essentially play this season, right?
Yeah,
So
great point.
it's possible that if those guys are in this game, maybe they let in like a week one and it's 2-1. Who knows how this
And the
ends
momentum
up.
shifts. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So I just think Ersson, the fact that he's back, hopefully can stay healthy here because he is a guy that he can make those momentum changing saves and just keep the momentum in the Flyers' favor when they are rolling. Where I think over this past month, right, that being able to dictate play in a lot of the games over this past month, controlling that expected goal share. Sure, like they've played better than teams, but when they do need that crucial save from their goalie, as we've seen, like Fedotov and Kolosov weren't coming up with that. So I think that was a crux for them this past month, and hopefully you get Ersson back here and he's kind of able to maybe give you one or two more of those key saves at key times, and that kind of keeps the momentum in the Flyers' favor as it did in this Ducks game, and it can also do that going ahead as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And right now, Ersson is the only goaltender on the Flyers of the three with a below 3 goals against. He's got a 2.86 goals against after last night. His save percentage is now inching, not there yet, but inching towards 900. He's at .888 with a winning record of 10-7 with five over. Let me do that math right. Yeah, with 4 overtime losses and 2 shutouts earned within there. So not too bad. Looking more respectable. He's going to need some more good performances to get a save percentage up there. But, if he can continue to do what he's doing, we might be talking a different story. And if he's in there consistently in net, because, look, it's easy to say that Ersson's had a bad season or whatever looking at his numbers, but the injuries have clearly played a large factor in that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he'd be at the top of the league in numbers or anything, but he probably would be above a 900 save percentage if he didn't have to kind of bounce in and out of the lineup with this injury.
Yeah, and there's been stretches, I would say, where leading into the injuries where he actually, it seemed like he was heating up and getting kind of into a groove and playing really well, and the injuries would happen. So
and
it's
set
just,
him back.
yeah, it's just unfortunate timing, and it's clear no matter what anybody says, right? Like Ersson has 10 wins on this season, Kolosov has 4, Fedotov has 4. Like it's clear he's their best option right now. So obviously they're gonna, run forward with him, and hopefully he can stay healthier because when they do have him back there, I think it's gonna give him a lot more of an opportunity to pull out some wins here potentially.
Yeah, and he has the support behind him because both Fedotov and Kolosov, while they haven't been amazing, they have had some pretty good games also where Sandstrom and Cal Peterson weren't really able to put that together last year. So he does have more support behind him this year than he did last year. So hopefully things can kind of balance out. We'll see. We're gonna do like a tankathon thing at towards the end of the podcast. Just again, we talked about it for months already, right? That this season is built in with insurance regardless of what happens. So, but let's talk about some standout performances. So we'll highlight it with the first one, and I know you have some good stats there too, and we can talk about that. But the highlight of the night, the player of the game, clearly was Travis Konechny. He had 4 assists on the night. He's a +2 at the end. Didn't even play that much because the lineup was just completely balanced. The 4 that led everybody in ice time was Noah Cates with 17-12, which is pretty low for leading all forwards in ice time.
The team was just rolling. That's more indicative of that, right? When your team's playing well like that, like you can just keep rolling the 4 lines. You don't really need to rely on one specific line over another here. So
well, he did kind of rely on the third line. I do want to get into that a little bit, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's a good thing actually. It'd be nice if we could do that regularly. Usually he's playing around 20 minutes, but 4 assist night for him. Just big everywhere on the ice, and I think he is tied for 11th in the league in points
Yeah, he is.
for all of you who are saying he's not a real top line player. Suck it. We've been talking about how he clearly is and how he would be putting up more points on a higher offensive team. And TK has arrived. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he's hit another level this year. He was already very good last year. And this year he's kind of entered stardom, right? Like
Yeah.
he's not best player in the league type of player, but he is in that upper echelon group of guys who can put up, top points. And I even did point per game measurements too, not just total points, because you look at somebody Kaprizov who's tied with him for 50 points and he's done it in like 38 games or something like that.
Yeah.
So yes, there are players who still score at a higher clip, but he's still right there in that like 12, 13 range at point per game. So he is in that upper echelon of point producing players. And we really haven't had a guy do this on the Flyers since we had Voracek and Giroux. So TK has officially arrived. He's not, a franchise caliber player, but he is a legitimate all-star top line player. And every night he has been good for the Flyers of late. And then like last night, he essentially, I don't know if he carried the offense because the entire team played well, but he sparked it. You know what I mean? Like without his solid performance, I don't know if they put up six points last night. Maybe they win 3-0.
Right? I would say he definitely carried a lot of it, and reason being, right? Like look at all of the goals scored. He's got the primary assist on every single goal. In terms of like or every single assist that he had, I mean, he has the primary assist, right? There's no secondary assists. All those 4 assists are primary, so it kind of just shows like he's putting the puck where it needs to be for these guys to score these goals. So he had a big hand in the goal creation for the Flyers in this one. But yeah, just like what more can you really say about connecting? It's not just the fact that it's 4 assists, but it's also just the fact that he brought a lot of physicality in this game.
Yeah.
Wasn't afraid to back down, as we see, right? Said he'd fight Gauthier, super involved in all the scrums, just doing what, he does best, which is kind of getting under the team, or under other players on the opposite team's skin and kind of just like being that pest, right, that we know Konechny can be. And I think at this point, we've obviously known it, Yariv, you and I, just in terms of him like being, a top line type of player, upper echelon type player. I think this is definitely, his coming out party for the rest of the league in a sense, just with, him being, tied for 11th in points right now with 50, 20 goals and 30 assists right now, potentially, on the pace here to get over 40 goals for the first time in his career, getting named to Team Canada. So I do just think like this is that season where Konechny's really getting noticed just beyond the Flyer sphere, but also like a national like media perspective in terms of like his season. And I'm interested to see with the 4 Nations, like there's been projections that he might, play with McDavid. So if he has some big games there, I think just like the overall discourse around him should really start changing for people. And I do think for most Flyers fans, they do understand like how valuable he is and just really how much of an impact player he's been for the Flyers here over the last couple of seasons. But it's just another one of those games where Konechny's kind of showing that he stirs the drink for the Flyers, both offensively and also just kind of getting the team involved and physical and kind of just being that like tough to play against team, because he has a real big part in that too, right?
Yeah, and being a player that it's looking like he's going to produce 95 points this year, anywhere between 90 and 100.
Exactly,
right?
Which is crazy.
That $8 million cap hit is, what is it, 8.5?
8.5, 8.5.
8.5, that is looking like a steal, semi-steal. I wouldn't say complete steal, but usually those players make 10 million plus in their new contract. So, he really highlighted. So other good performances. I know you have other details here to add, so I'm just going to list them off, Vasili, and then you can go more in depth. So Hathaway had a goal and assist, +2. Lawton was a +2 with an assist. Paling, goal and assist. Beautiful goal by Paling, +2. Michkov had the power play goal. Frost had a goal and an assist, +2. Tippett, goal and assist, +2. We mentioned Drysdale already, goal and assist, +1. York had 5 shots on net, led all defensemen in ice time. He was a +2. Also played a really good game. Probably should have had a goal. Sanheim also had a really good game. Didn't need to play as much as normal, +2 and assist. Risto also played really well. Only had a +1, but had a very strong game. as normal. And then Ersson, obviously, with the shutout. And I would say primarily everybody had a good game, just not everybody put up points.
Yeah, when you win 6-0, the team's just rolling on all cylinders, and that's was essentially what's happening here. I think the big thing is just like players ending long goalless droughts. Like you have Tippett ends an 8-game drought, right? Drysdale ends a 26-game goalless drought. Michkov ends a 5-game drought. Hathaway even himself ends a 16-game drought as well. So I just think that just does wonders for guys' confidence, right? You get off the schneid, big 6-0 win. Like this is something that the team can look at and say, hey, like, you know, we've been playing really well, following the process and the way we want to play, you know, moving up the ice quickly, quick zone exits, trying to use our transition offense. And it has been paying off for us, you know, obviously with this 4-game losing streak. And then it all kind of culminating here. And it's such an important game, kind of giving the big fuck you to Cutter Gauthier, getting to win 6-0. And then these guys just all getting off the schneid. I think it's just you know, a perfect storm for them to kind of build on this going ahead. You know, use this as a confidence builder to have some of these guys that, you know, have these big droughts to kind of keep it going, and it potentially be the start of, you know, a positive streak versus a negative one. So I think something to look at.
I think you're right, and the fans showed up for the game. You know, this was obviously a big game on the calendar, and the team showed up. And we've had a lot of instances where over the years, not just like past couple of years, where
big game in the standings or big important game in the team,
or Ed Snyder's Remembrance Day or whatever
against Dallas just the other night. Yeah, the legacy game, they get dismantled, right? Like,
right.
Which is tough sometimes, because for these players, you have to think like they know it's an important night. They don't want to go there and lay an egg, but like sometimes it just is what it is. So I think for, you know, this being such a big game for the fan perspective, for them to come through for the fans here, it's a huge thing. And I do think if the Flyers get, you know, closer back into the playoff mix here, like there's still 5 points out here. But I do think if they get closer into it and even maybe back into, you know, the territory where they're 1-2 points away from the wild card, you can point to a game like this and say, hey, maybe this was a big turning point for them, trying to get the confidence going and really getting things, you know, rolling for the second half of the year here.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So let's talk about line combinations. So obviously the lines changed for this one, and we talked about it in last episode before the drudging by the Dallas Stars, where Tortorella refused to change the lines again. Again, I think he waited way too long to change the lines. They obviously were not working. He kept sticking with them.
You want me to read them out, Yariv, just for the people here?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead, read the lines out.
Okay, so we got Tippett, Frost, Konechny. It was Forrester, Cates, Brink. So that was essentially the one that stayed together. Lixell, Couturier, Michkov, Lawton, Paling, Hathaway. D pairs have been the same as they have been.
Yeah. So, and again, I was not happy with the lines. So, in general, I do think Frost and Tippett work. I think you can put TK with anybody. But I think getting Frost with Tippett definitely reignited Frost's game. And it showed in the previous game, right? He put Frost with them. Frost put up a goal. So Frost needed a change too, because he also just wasn't mixing with Michkov. It's not like all blame on Frost or something. They're just,
the chemistry just wasn't there.
Yeah, the chemistry was not there. The line wasn't good. And again, I call it incredibly temporary. And I felt that way about the lineup. Now this lineup looks a lot closer to what we want. Like the fourth line, I think needs to stay the way it is, even though Lawton's having a good season and everything. I think the roles matter. I still think he's too married to that third line. I hear what he's talking about. I get what he's saying. I think he's worried that intensity from those players will go away if he changes it up. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he still might have to break that lineup. It's hard to say that after the game they just put together. So I expect things to stay the same.
Point. I see the point in the sense that, like, you know, these guys are rolling. I think Tortorella's fear, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, I think that he thinks that, hey, if we break these three guys up, they're going now, they might like fall off a cliff again like they were earlier in the season. That might be the fear, right? So yeah, I understand it. But I do think, like, if they change it up, like we see what happens in this game when they kind of, you know, throw things in the blender, mix it up a little bit after the struggles, and it's a really positive result. So you can't really say that, hey, if you did remove one of those guys from that line, because I think you can keep two of them together, but if you did remove the one, I don't think it's going to be a terrible, you know, situation. Things are on fire, right?
Yeah. So I have a few suggestions that I wrote down. So I do expect Farabee back in the lineup, maybe even next game. Typically he doesn't do that when the team wins, so Farabee might have to sit another game. here before he gets back in the lineup. I don't think Lixell played a large role in that win, so I don't know if Tortorella will really care too much, and I think he will want to get Farabee back in the lineup. I don't think he necessarily like wanted to bench Farabee. I think he more wanted to give Lixell a game because he's just been sitting around. But my suggestions are break up the third line still. I think that you should try to move Forrester off of that line and put Farabee back with Brink. See if you can get it back again. Farabee needs a jolt. That line is playing well. Maybe it's worth trying, right? I think other suggestions that I had was putting Forrester with Frost and TK or Tippett or something like that. And then the Tippett with Michkov and Coots could work. But like even after last night, like the thing that interests me the most is maybe just getting Forrester with Michkov and Coots and see if Farabee and Brink can be aligned.
Yeah.
I get why he won't do it now, and I don't think it even makes sense to do it after this type of win. You like stick with what you got and just put Farabee in for Lixell because the team played so strong. You got to reward that. That's what makes sense. But I do think we're going to have to break up this third line. And I look at the way Forrester plays. I look at the fact that it's more important to get Michkov going offensively than it is to get Brink going offensively, and I think Brink has been doing just his thing, and I think he can have success playing with other guys too. I don't think we need to be too married to just thinking Brink and Forrester and Cates. I think Cates would do well anywhere. I think there should be a scenario where Cates might have to play with TK. You know, that's why I said like maybe TK, Forrester, and Cates. You know, I don't know exactly, but I think they can't be too married. What I would like to see for next game though is Forrester with Coots and Michkov, and Farabee with Brink and Cates. That probably won't happen. We'll see how Farabee does with Coots and Michkov, but they have tried it already and it didn't work very well. On paper, it looks good, but in execution, it hasn't worked. But that might just be the move in the short term: is just get Farabee with Coots and Michkov. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I will say this. They probably were the worst line at 5-on-5 yesterday. Michkov, Coots, and Lixell. Not a bad game, but they were the least impactful of the group.
Yeah, I mean, I just think in terms of the lines, they're probably not going to change after that win. It just is what it is. I mean, I think next time I like your suggestions. Like if they ever do try to change it up here, if there's like another stinker, or they just kind of go on a little bit of a losing streak. I think Frost connecting to Tippett, they'll keep together at this point just because they look like they're gaining some chemistry. I do like that line. They've been put together in the past and have done well. So I think the skill of Frost and connecting it plays off each other well. And then also Tippett and Frost have some chemistry. Cates, Brink, Forrester is interesting in the sense that like it's been such a good line, but I do think just to get other pieces going, it makes sense to break it up. Like what I would do is I would probably actually get Farabee back in there with Couturier and Michkov, and then I think maybe swap them, like you said, right? Like get Forrester either in there, with Couturier potentially. I wouldn't even mind to see Forrester, Frost, and Konechny either. Like maybe Tippett back on a line with Couturier too, I think would be interesting. So I think there's a whole bunch of things you can do, but I just think these pairs for me make the most sense to stay together right now. And that's probably let's keep, Frost, Konechny together, keep Cates, Brink together, keep Couturier, Michkov together. Keep that fourth line together, and you kind of rotate between the rest and see what happens.
See, I think the chemistry there, it's Frost and Tippett. I actually don't think Tippett and TK have that great of chemistry. I think they're both just really good players, so they just produce. But I think the problem is and we talked about this last episode, is that they both are the players who come up the wing and shoot. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm trying to get Michkov going, and I want to give him a goal scorer to give the puck to, because I think they will score more goals throughout their lineup.
Forrester would be good, yeah, in that
right.
Spot,
that's why I was thinking Forrester, because Farabee's having trouble scoring this year, and Forrester has been on a hot streak. So I'm kind of like approaching it from that angle. I think the pairings that I look to keep together are Frost and Tippett, and then I think the best center for Michkov so far has been Coots.
I like that.
I kind of see that. TK, I honestly, I would be interested in seeing TK play with, and again, we're not talking about changing the lines going into next game, but even TK with Forrester and Cates, or
Yeah,
they
that'd
go,
be interesting.
yeah,
I just think they keep Frost Konechny because you're seeing Frost kind of show some life now that he's back with Konechny. I know you think it's Tippett. I just think Tippett's so streaky. I like the chemistry between them, but I don't think both of them are driving each other. I personally think it's Konechny more like
yeah,
bringing Frost up to his level in a sense, right? So that's my thought on it.
you might be right, but I just feel like the relationship that Tippett and Frost are obviously close,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
and I feel like they
I just think
kind
they're
of
too
bond.
streaky. Yeah, for sure. I
Yes,
think
they
they're
are.
both. I think
They
they're both
are,
super streaky together. So
and
you're,
TK is not.
and TK's not. So if you keep, for example, connecting with Frost, Tippett's the guy you rotate. At least you have a guy in connecting who's super consistent with Frost to kind of drag him into it when he's inconsistent.
Yeah.
That's my process. Where you have the two inconsistent guys. Once they get a cold streak, they're just going to be super cold together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think there's also the option of I look at the way Cates has been playing on along the boards and the fact that he's scoring and all that is great, but his ability to just take the puck from players.
Yeah, you could put
he-
Cates and Konechny, I think.
yes, for sure. But I was actually thinking like if you're keeping that top line together, having Cates with Michkov because Michkov is not great at taking the puck from players right now. He's not good at it, actually. And I think that's what Tortorella is really trying to drive home. He's kind of where Brink was last year in his ability to take the puck away from players. He's kind of getting beat. He's not great at like winning a board battle. And again, he's young. He's not strong enough yet. His timing isn't great. And I look at Cates, and that's why I like that he's with Coots too, is like I want a player who can compensate for what he's doing, but and make sure he has time and space. And I really think it's important to get Michkov going, like crucial if we want to win more games because you have more developed players in Tippett, right? Like he's more developed he's obviously older than Michkov. Like he's good to like kind of continue out there, but like Michkov needs the support, and I feel like we need to give him support to keep growing his game and his offensive production, keep his confidence high, which is where I'll go next. The power play. Michkov obviously had a goal in the power play last night. He still is not consistently on the top power play unit, though he is being sprinkled in there. It seems like some game, at times he's on the top power play unit, and then at other times he's on the secondary unit. I still think this is an absolute joke. I can rationalize every decision they make, but it is so noticeably different when Michkov is on the ice, on the power play with the top guys versus pretty much anyone else. I get the roles. I get why you wanted Farabee or Lawton, which they tried for a short period of time last game and then pulled them off, right? Like, I get why they're doing this, but the reality is move someone else off. Like, all I see is when that puck touches Michkov's stick, the entire opposition team doesn't know what to do when he has the puck.
They try to focus on him, right? And that's what you want. So
yes. And when you have him and TK opposites of each other, that is the most dangerous the power play looks every time. And I will say this, the fact that Cam York has still not been tried on the second power play unit is ridiculous. I get that Risto is playing well. I do. I even agree with what you said last episode, that like it's actually been better than, it doesn't look bad with him back there, and he's got a big shot, and he's done it before. It's not his first foray.
Yeah, he has like 5 or 6 40-point seasons with Buffalo where he was their number one guy, quarterback in the power play, basically.
Yeah, totally get it. But I'm looking at it long term and what York is, and he is an offensive defenseman. I know.
Yeah, you want to develop him too, right? So.
Yes. And I'm also like a little frustrated that it hasn't been tried as Risto and York, because York can't necessarily play up in the lineup much because Sanheim is up every shift. He's just driving play like every time. So it forces York to sit back, right? So, I do kind of look at, how Sealer doesn't get a lot of minutes. I don't know. I think Sealer could play well with Sanheim and just complement Sanheim and just always be back. It's not like he gets beat. It's not like he's terrible moving the puck up the ice. It's not like he's weak. If anything, it makes that top pairing a little stronger physically. I don't know. It's something to think about. I don't think we're going to see it, but the power play, I do still think, even though it was at 50%, yesterday, and that's great. I'm not relying on that as like a measure of the where the power play is. I think it still looked considerably better when Michkov was on it, even though they scored without him once. Not being on it, I still think it always looks better when Michkov is on it.
Yeah, I think like it's pretty much a no-brainer for me, right? Like when Michkov's on that top unit, I just think that's their best opportunity to score and create offense. I get trying to spread it around a little bit maybe, and that's why you have them on the second unit. But I just think the team is at their most dangerous. You're going to capitalize and actually, score on your potential chances at a lot higher rate if you have Michkov out there with the other best players on the team, like a Konechny, like a Tippett, like a Frost, for example. Obviously he gets, the power play goal yesterday. It's a much needed goal just after kind of being on the schneid here, breaking that 5-game goalless drought. Gets to kind of, I mean, I would just say, like, I don't want to say his office, but like that's pretty much like where his office is in the power play, like right by the net there, either behind the net or around the net. And he gets that like rebound, off Konechny's shot and is able to kind of put it in by Gibson. But yeah, I do agree. Like if you've watched the Flyers this season at any point for a consistent basis, it's easy to realize that when he has the puck on the power play, has time and space, first of all, he draws players into him, which opens up other players around him for opportunities. Passing lanes open up, but it's true, right? That the other team's defense is typically very worried about what he's going to do, and it's because of that creativity and just the way that he thinks the game. They're not ultimately sure what he might do with the puck just because he's so creative and try certain things that other players might not with like really tight short angle shots and things like that some other players might not do that. So they kind of have to be really cognizant of Michkov on the ice. And I think that adds another element because you have a bunch of defenses focusing on him, opens up your other players, makes it easier to create scoring opportunities on the power play. So, I mean, my preference is get him out there on the first unit consistently. Hopefully we kind of see that going ahead. Last night we saw him out there with the goal that he scored. He was with the first unit, but obviously to your point, right? Drysdale's goal, he wasn't out there. So hopefully we see it to happen more consistently, but we'll have to kind of see how the remainder of the games going ahead.
I think when it's Drysdale, TK, and Michkov, that is the best combination the Flyers have for the power play.
Yeah, I just think in terms of
passing,
in terms of quarterbacking, right? You have you're connecting on the left side with the right hand shot. You can kind of get the one timer. You have Michkov on the other side. You can also get the one time, and then you have Drysdale at the top of the blue line, kind of quarterbacking. So I would have that set up in my opinion, right?
Yeah, and actually I think Frost has looked good on the power play, so this is not a knock on him. But if your concern is getting a big body in front of the net, that's what you use Sean Couturier for, and you keep Tippett out there and you move Frost to the second unit. If you're trying, because the second unit hasn't looked bad and it does have talent on it.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of understand where their head is at. But to me, I'm just like, guys, like for how bad the power play is, I was like, we're just playing games.
You're overthinking a little too much.
Yes. Yeah, like you're and I get why they're overthinking because their power play still sucks. But the only times it has ever been normal and not bottom of the barrel is when Michkov is on it. That's the only time you see creative puck movement on a regular basis. It was when Michkov is on it. He's not perfect yet. He's still a kid. He still gets muscled out. He still gets he'll make a mistake here and there, but it's very evident, and it also drives his play at even strength. Like when he succeeds on the power play, it stems into his even strength play, and he puts up even strength points that way.
This helps the development, right? Like in the confidence. So that's your thought process with that. Obviously, like you get him kind of more puck touches on the power play, get him feeling the puck more. You're going to have more success at 5-on-5. That's totally my viewpoint as well. Like if you get him that ability to handle the puck early in games, especially on the power play, I think you kind of get him going, get the juices flowing, and you kind of see him get more engaged right off the hop, right? So you have him on that first unit. I think it makes the most sense. And he's still a young player, right? So like if you can get him in these points on the power play, he's only going to get better. So I think it just makes sense to keep trotting him out there, because he gives you your best opportunity to win and score, and nonetheless, in my opinion. So you might as well just let him work through the struggles if he does have them on that first unit, because it's going to make him a better player in the long run, in my opinion. Learning through the mistakes, learning what works and what does not work at the NHL level. It's all a process and it's all part of it. So I just think the more reps he's going to get doing that as that kind of guy on the power play, it'll only be beneficial for the Flyers as he continues to grow as a player, because he's still so young and just so talented. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's take a quick break here. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe if you made it this far. Hit the notification bell for notifications on when the episodes come out. For the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating there as well. Again, all of these things are the best way to support our podcast. It is what drives the growth of the show. So if you have not done any of that so far, if you could do that now or after you're done listening, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so the other thing we wanted to talk about is, obviously the Flyers, while last night was very exciting, standing wise, things are not looking amazing. As of right now, they are in the lucky number 7 position where they ended up getting Michkov.
Yeah, not great. Just actually above Anaheim. Anaheim is the 6th team, so
yeah, which is funny. So the Flyers are kind of sitting there in that number 7 pick. I don't want to do the sim the lottery thing. It's a little too early for that. I'll hit the sim button real quick. They jumped to 2nd, which right now James Higgins, for some reason, is ranked 2nd on their in their list. He probably will not go 2nd. He
probably will be 1st. Yeah.
Yes, he will be 1st, which leaves Porter Martone as the number 2.
I saw that tankathon. Like, it's really weird. Like, I don't think Porter Martone is even going to go 2nd. So it's a weird. It's gonna be
a weird year, dude. Yeah. With like this draft, as it was like seemingly like a very strong draft, now seems more like an average draft. So I'm not really sure, but I think James Higgins, if the Flyers walk away with him, would obviously be exceptional. Lucky that I just simmed it and they landed at 5.
That's a sign, Yariv. Better mark it down now.
Yeah, right. Again, lucky number 7, dude. Last time we had 7, we got Michkov. So, but we'll see. It's obviously too early. The Flyers might finish in a higher position outside of the top 10 and still not make the playoffs. They might end up being in this area. We'll see how they kind of get stuff together. As of right now, it is not clear where the Flyers are going to draft or what they would end up taking in the draft because it depends on where they fall, right? And they still have other picks. According to this, they would take Higgins at 2, William Moore at 21, also a center, and Cameron Reed at 25. So none of these picks who's a left-handed defenseman for the Kitchener Rangers, offensive defenseman. So there is no consistency with this. Like, this will not be the case, and that's why we don't really care about this stuff till later down the line. We'll have Steve Kornianos back on, obviously, before the draft and then after the draft. We always do that every year. But I did want to mention that the Flyers right now are sitting in a position for a lottery pick.
Yeah, top 10 right now in the 7th spot. Like, I do think, for example, if they did land in that 7th spot, where they are in the rebuild, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of mentioned this on Twitter. Like, they need a top center. Being in 7th might give them that opportunity to potentially either trade up and select who they want or select somebody that falls them at 7th. So just based on where they're at, it's not necessarily the worst thing. I think the team, and just for a lot of the development of the guys on the team, the best thing would probably be for them to sneak into the playoffs if possible. Obviously, they're 5 points right now out of the playoffs. They have 41 points. Columbus has 46. So they're going to have to really turn things around a little bit here and string some wins together if they want to get really back in that mix of being 1-2 points out of the wild card. But just looking at it, like, if you look at the standings, right, like, Boston's in that first wild card with 47 points. Columbus has 46. Below those teams, you have Montreal at 44 points, Pittsburgh at 44 points, Ottawa at 43, the Red Wings at 42, Rangers 42, Islanders 41, then Flyers at 41. So, between the Flyers and Columbus, you have 6 teams ahead of them, but those teams are really only separated by 3 points. So in terms of where this East, like the bottom of this East and like end of the wild card finishes, it's really all up in the air at this point. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Like, the Flyers, who are, at 41 points right now, could be back up and only 1 point out of the wild card in a week or two from now. Like, this is changing so often at this point that it's going to be a real interesting race, both to see like what team actually ends up getting the playoff, but also what the positioning ends up being for the draft rankings here, because it's just so bundled together that 1 point might make a difference in you either making the playoffs or potentially, where you might draft and select.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. Where you might draft and select like a cornerstone type of player. So I just think this is going to be a real interesting end of this season for a lot of different reasons. Both, if the Flyers get back in the mix and even if they kind of fall out of the race here, because I think a lot of these other teams are going to kind of stay in and around where the Flyers are here at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, we'll keep track of that. I don't expect the Flyers to sit at 7, and we're probably still 2 months away from caring about where they're finishing because this is gonna be a long time, right? Because it's January. We're gonna probably have to wait till like end of February, around the
Yeah.
trade deadline at the very least, to care about their actual
I
standings when
just
it
think
comes
you're
to the
gonna,
draft.
yeah, I just think there's gonna be so many moving pieces. Like if you look at these standings 2 weeks ago, Montreal was in the position the Flyers were in, and the Flyers were like where Montreal was, like 1 point out. Like I just think, you had Montreal, Pittsburgh, Ottawa going a little bit of a streak and a run here and get some wins. You might see now the Islanders, the Flyers, and the Rangers going a little bit of a streak while those teams step back in the next couple of weeks. Like I just think all these teams are not that great in general. So
Yeah.
there's just going to be a ton of inconsistency between
Well,
Columbus, Montreal, Pittsburgh, Ottawa, Detroit, Rangers, Islanders, Flyers. Those teams have just been inconsistent all season. So I just think we're
yeah.
going to continue to see it.
The Rangers are the one team that I would not be shocked if they end up
Turning it
kind of
around. Yeah.
turning it around. Just
But they're
because
gonna need to really like get it going here quick.
I
Like
can tell you that Kako trade is not paying off for them, which I thought it was a stupid trade at the time. He is playing top line for Seattle.
doing
So
well. Yeah.
yeah, that was a stupid trade. It was a bad return. It didn't turn anything around for them. It was another one of those things, and I see Flyers fans guilty of this, of blaming a young guy for a team's problems. I thought it was very stupid.
It's just it's a dumb trade. It's just what he
mean,
said. It's just what he said. Like you can't say what he said and expect not something to happen. So
yeah,
he
I
didn't
guess.
handle himself well, like saying, "Oh, like I got scratched," and there's other guys on the team that played worse than me. They should have got scratched. Like you can't say that stuff in the media.
I don't disagree, but it does feel like he was kind of being picked on to some degree there. Because he is playing top line for a team that is playing better than the Rangers, and he has 7 points in the last 10 games. And this was a former second overall pick. So it does tell me somewhere along the way that was probably mismanaged. Because his numbers were never really that bad. Again, his best season was 40 points with the Rangers in 82 games. And then this year he had 14 points in 30 games, which is not bad
already
either.
has 7 and 10, so it just shows. But I do think, at least for the Kako situation, there's faults on both sides. I think the Rangers probably did some things that they probably would regret with just the way they handle his development. But Kako too, I think, like you can't go on the media and say what he said just in the midst of that losing streak and all the guys getting traded. Like,
I agree.
Yeah,
it's that youth. Yeah, I totally agree. But I do wonder what led up to that and how it was communicated with him. But I do agree with what you're saying.
Probably frustration on his end, like where he's probably thinking maybe I am playing well and some other guys aren't getting benched, but I am. Like, who knows, really?
I'll tell you, look, I really like Laviolette. We've talked about him quite a bit here. The fact that he is still the Rangers coach at this point doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I just think it's easy to see what they were doing, right? So, like, obviously, instead of firing the coach, they went another route saying, hey, you guys might not like what's happening with the coach. We don't care. We're not removing the coach. They doubled down. They traded 2 players. So that just shows that he's here at least to the end of this season for sure. It's interesting. I think, it'll be good when we get Steve back on. I kind of want to get his perspective now that all these moves have happened, because when we had him on last, the Trouba trade was yet to happen. Kako trade was yet to happen. Obviously, Steve's a Rangers fan. So it'll be interesting to see what his perspective is, just being closer to the situation, kind of what's happened with Kako and just all this stuff in general, because I think he'll obviously have a different bit of insight than we do, just because he's so so close to everything.
I agree, but I think it is the coach's job to set the tone. And I've said this on here many of times, when you say players getting called out and not the coach taking ownership of what is going on, that's a bad sign. They traded away their captain. They did no better after getting rid of him. They traded away the former second overall pick. They know better without him. So clearly the problems are not those players.
That's why it shows to me that, like, you probably should have fired the coach, but for some reason management is thinking, we're not doing that. We're not giving in to the players. We're leaving Laviolette in. Sure. And we've seen this happen in the past with Laviolette. Like, he's not a guy that really has lengthy stays at this point in his career. Like, This is only his second season with the Rangers. He was with Washington for what, 2 seasons? We
Yeah.
saw him with the Flyers. It was really only 3 seasons, and he was out the door. Like Laviolette's not a guy that really lasts too long in his tenures at this point. Like I think his
Well,
longest tenure was with Carolina. So
yeah,
he's a win now. He's a win
he's
now
not
coach.
exactly. He's not a mentor coach. He's a give me my star pieces and I will put it together and I will get them firing offensively. He's
Yeah.
very good at that. And I love his personality, like from a fan standpoint. That's why, like, I'm not going to shit on Laviolette, but the reality is, it's like when you're a competing team that's supposed to finish at the top of the division and your
Yeah.
team is collapsing, your only real play is to get rid of the coach. And maybe they didn't think they had another better option available. That could be part of the problem. But when you start picking apart your roster, you're setting yourself up to make big mistakes.
For sure. I just think when you look at it for the Rangers, like they should have fired the coach. They're just probably thinking like we fired Gerard Gallant last season and brought in Laviolette to replace him, and now we're gonna fire Laviolette just the season after and then replace him with a new coach. It's just too much turnover, right?
They probably shouldn't have fired Gallant.
Probably, but
right? That's probably where they started their mistake, because you don't get many of these. You know what I mean? It's not
as an ownership,
you're right. You can't,
or as a management group, yeah.
Right. So you have to be like, it has to be, if you're gonna fire Gallant, you got to bring in a different type of coach, and they didn't. They brought in a very similar type of coach, which is a coach who takes over your team and when they're good and makes them good, like makes them highly competitive on a nightly basis, which Laviolette is good at when he's given a good team. And then I look at a guy like Peter DeBoer, who he is a more dynamic coach, right? Like he can work with a bad team or a good team. Guy like John Tortorella, he can work with a bad team or a good team. They can do both. There are some coaches out there that are better with young guys. Some coaches that are better with, like Laviolette's a guy who excels with veterans, and they have a lot of youth on that team. So, and Tortorella's probably not going to be here forever either, right? Like when this team is ready to go all out, there's a good chance Tortorella's retired.
There'll be another
at
coach
that point,
at
right?
that point, most likely,
and maybe it'll be Mike Sullivan at that point, because it does feel like a weird way it might end up being Mike Sullivan. You know what I mean? Like his time in Pittsburgh will run out. They'll start their rebuild.
Yeah, Tortorella's his mentor. It only kind of makes sense,
and it'll be like, well, when Sullivan's ready to come in here, I'm going to step away.
I would say, I mean, my guess is that I would say him. I was gonna say Berube. Obviously, he just got hired with the Leafs, so I just think he doesn't line up. But if somehow Berube was available and the Flyers looking for a coach, I also just think with Keith Jones in the mix, it'd be pretty hard for them not to bring him back. But we'll see.
I will say, somebody good will be fired by the time the Flyers need a new coach. Let's be honest. Good coaches get fired all the time. That's why I always say it is not a reflection if a guy's a good coach or not just because he was fired. Every coach gets fired.
It's the timing of him being the coach of that team and how it's syncing with the roster and all that stuff.
I remember years ago when I was younger, when Berube was fired here, I said he was a bad coach. And then he went on to win a cup. You know what I mean? Like I learned my lesson, understanding that most of these guys are actually pretty good coaches. That's where I always I hesitate with shitting too much on Rocky Thompson, because I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe he's not good at the power play stuff, but he's clearly really good at some things when it comes to coaching the offense. It's not his only job to coach the power play. So that's why I kind of understand why he's not fired, but my frustrations with the power play are so high at this point that I'm kind of just like, please pull the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, exactly.
Or hire a specialist. I don't understand.
Well, they did try. I mean, they apparently had the whole brain trust sit down with John LeClaire and all these guys.
That's not what I wanted. They used to have a power play specialist.
Yeah, I know.
Jim Montgomery was, or not Jim Montgomery. What's his name?
Joe Mullen.
Joe Mullen, thank you. Joe Mullen was here to coach.
He was the power play coach.
The power play coach. Bring in a power play coach. This is going to be 4 years in a row. You're finishing towards the bottom of the league, and 3 of those are at the very bottom of the league, and 2 of them are historically bad. The fact that there's no power play specialist brought in here to literally just work on fixing the power play is head scratching to me. And maybe that is the next step if they are not able to remedy this or do not see an improvement as the season goes on. Like they need to finish 25th or higher just for them not to do that, in my opinion. They finish at 20th or something, or at least near 20%, I can be like, okay, we showed progress. But if you don't show that and you do not bring a specialist in here, I'm sorry, it's not the talent. It's your execution.
Yeah, it's just it hasn't been good, obviously. I just think, at this point, if it continues this way, he's going to get fired, just is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit? Let's do our prospect readouts. I want to talk about the Phantoms a little bit. You're going to read the beginning of the prospect readouts. You'll do the first 21. So we'll do that after this. First, I want to talk about the Phantoms just a little bit. So the Phantoms have been playing a little bit better. I've been mostly just tracking their games, watching a little bit here and there. I just want to point out some interesting stats that I think most people are not really aware of. Massimo Rizzo has 7 points in his last 9 games. He was coming back from a pretty serious injury. Didn't do very well coming back, understandably so. He's also a rookie at the AHL level, but 7 points in his last 9 games, pretty good. He's been scoring goals too and putting up assists. So he is developing. Again, I'm kind of down on Rizzo. I'd love for him to prove me wrong. And right now he is inching up that he might be relevant next season, most likely, as being a potential call up if he can continue to do what he's doing right now, because they need a top line like playmaking center at the AHL level, and he could at least fill that need at the AHL level. I don't think he'll be that guy at the NHL level, but it's still good to see. The other one, which is also very interesting to us, because we talked about Zayd Wisdom and him now, being close to half a point a game, where he like wasn't scoring at all. And he was definitely on fire. Maybe even can still be considered. He didn't have a point last night. Elliot Denoye, on the other hand, has 6 points in his last 6 games. And I think that's also extremely encouraging.
It's great to see. I mean, just based on his play lately or before this 6-game streak, right? He just has been very underwhelming in comparison to his rookie year. So
yes, incredibly, but at least he's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. This is super positive, right? So that's what I mean. Like the fact that he's getting back on track, 6 points in 6 games, like after having such a cold streak since the rookie year, like this is what you ultimately want to see. It's just now, can he do it more consistently as it continues along here? So we'll have to see what happens.
Yep. Alexis Gendron scored again. He has 15 goals on the year. Yeah.
That's really positive too. Like he's a guy that I always thought has a ton of skill, and for a 7th round pick, like it's really just found money.
Goals.
It's really just found money. Yeah, I think with Gendron, right, like just continuing to see him score.
I'm sorry, he has 16 points on the season, 11 goals.
Okay, yeah. Apologies. Still, nonetheless, right, like he's on pace to potentially get 20 goals. Still a very young player.
20?
Yeah, I believe so. 20 or 21. I'm not exactly sure.
He just turned 20.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just the fact that he's, on pace there for potentially 20 goals, like I think it's, what more can you really ask for a guy who's a 7th round pick? So I think his progression is interesting to me, because I think he does have potential upside to be a sniper. So we'll see kind of how the other facets of his game come around.
Yeah, he's a boomer bust type of prospect, but for a 7th round pick, there's like zero downside.
Like I said, found money. Exactly.
At the very least, he's going to be a goal scorer for you at the AHL level, because he already is. At such a young age. Emil Andre scored last night, which is really nice to see. I think he's nearing a point a game now since coming back down. Let me see how many points he has. Sorry. So he has 6 points in 11 games total. So he wasn't putting up points, I think, in the first 3 or 4 games. Probably just, the shock of coming back down.
Yeah, nobody ever wants to get sent down, so it's like a tough thing for these guys, right? He probably thought with the way he was playing that he might be up in the NHL for the rest of the season. So I can imagine that he's probably a bit frustrated.
Yeah, I think he has 5 points in his last 7 games. I think that's what he is. Okay. And he's a plus player for a team that doesn't have a lot of them, which is good. And then Ethan Sansom right now leads all defensemen in goals at the AHL level. He's got 6 goals, 6 assists. So again, we brought up Ethan quite a bit. I'm interested to see how he continues to develop. He's also very young. He's like kind of in that Gendron mix because he's a later pick, but has upside. So I really want him. I'd love to see him finish the season with like 12 goals or so.
Yeah, not a guy you'd expect to lead that defense in goals, I would say, to be honest. So
right, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
That's a really good development. I think he's just steadily been continuing to get better, playing with the Phantoms here, both defensively and offensively. His last year at the WHL, he was kind of showing a bit of that boom of a shot that he had. So it's nice that he's kind of getting to use that a little bit at the AHL level. So we'll see where he goes. But yeah, I think it's been positive for Ethan for sure.
And last night the Phantoms did have a shutout as well. They won 3-0, but it was not Peterson in net. It was Parker Gahagan was in net, so he did earn the shutout last night. I still think, I didn't look at the stats, but I still think that all goaltenders are still below 900. But that would at least lift his. He's the number 3 at the AHL level without Malkiniemi being healthy.
Yeah, I believe they're also under 900 still. So
Yep. Okay, let's do our prospect readouts again. Do 1 to 21, and
sure.
I will do
Yeah.
the rest.
All right, so we have Denver Barkey having a really good season. Really,
Four
really
point night
good.
last night.
Yeah, really, really good night last night. I was going to say 4 points. He's got 52 points in 32 games. Ilya Pautov, almost a point a game. He's got 31 points in 34 games. Samu Tuamalo has cooled down a bit, but he's still got 25 points in 33 games.
Real quick, Paltov looks like to be speeding up there because he was slowing down. Now he's inching back towards a point a game. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
which is really good. Lixell, 24 points in 25 games. He obviously played for the Flyers last night. Jacob Gauthier, 23 points in 36 games. Jet Lachenko, 23
I think
points.
Luchenko's hurt. He's missed the last 2 games.
Oh, okay. I wasn't too sure about that, but thanks, Yuri,
Yeah.
for mentioning that. So yeah, Lachenko's 23 points in 18 games. Oliver Bonk, back now with the Knights, 23 points in 26 games. Cole Knubel, having a really strong season here with University of Notre Dame, 22 points in 18 games. Spencer Gill, 22 points in 35 games. Carter Sutherland, 21 points in 38 games here. Jack Berglund, just making his way to the Allsvenskan. He's got 18 points in 30 games.
I do want to add something for Southern.
Yeah, sure. None in the Allsvenskan yet for Berglund. Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, dude. My bad.
Yeah.
Just want to say Carter Southern is now minus 12. So considering he was like at a minus like 19 at one point or something, trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I guess still not great. I honestly don't expect the kid to get a contract with the Flyers, but
no, I don't think so.
We'll see at this point. Rodrigo Abels, 17 points in 30 games, having a decent season, but nothing too crazy for him, like almost half a point a game, pretty much. 16 points in 29 games for Gendron. He scored last night. 16 points in 33 games for Ciernik. About half a point a game as well. Richard's still injured, but still over a point a game with the Phantoms, 16 points in 14 games. Alex Bump, I don't think anything's changed since the last time. 15 points in 18 games. Rhett Gardner, 15 points in 36 games. He's kind of playing more of like a bottom line lineup role, I believe, for them. Oscar Eklund, 15 points in 35 games. And then Ben Gleason with the Phantoms has 10 points in 19 games, 10 all assists, and he's been pretty good for them since he's joined the team. And then Heikki Ruohonen in the USHL. He's got 13 points in 20 games, and he had a really good showing for Finland at the World Juniors.
He scored since coming back.
Yeah, and then the last year for the Phantoms, 13 points in 31 games for Helge Grans, and he's continuing to kind of play well. And it's good to see that. I believe it's him and Andre playing together, so that's been a successful pairing for them in the past.
Yep. Zaid Wisdom, 13 points in 32 games. Again, hovering at 0.41, but he had 3 points in the beginning of the season in like 20 some games. So in like 20 games or something like that. So considerably better performance at this point. Owen McLaughlin, 13 points in 21 games. His numbers are down. Looks like he's probably not going to get signed in the end. I'm not seeing any evidence of that, at least at this point. Austin Malloy, he's got 13 points in 30 games. He is a plus 24, but that's in the U.S. Hockey League. Ethan Sansom, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points in 33 games. Hunter Thompson, Hunter S.
Thompson, my favorite.
Yeah, I love him. Hunter McDonald, 12 points in 35 games. He's still plus 6, so he's doing his role there as the defensive defenseman and chipping in some points. Elliot Denoyer now has 11 points in 31 games, much better than where he was previously. He was not putting up any points, so really nice to see at least he's trending in the right direction, as well as Wisdom. Louis Belpidio has 11 points in 33 games. Mateo Mann, 10 points in 30 games in the queue. I don't think he'll get an NHL contract, maybe AHL in the end. J.R. Avon, 10 points in 32 games. I'm disappointed with his offensive production as well. I thought he would take a step forward. Santeri Silku, still injured. He's been out like almost all season, 9 points in 7 games. It's a shame. Massimo Rizzo, now 9 points in 22 games. We talked about him already. Devin Kaplan, 8 points in 17 games. His offensive production has actually gone up as well. and we'll see. He most likely will get a contract and come over to the AHL at some point. Brian Zanetti, 7 points in 37 games. He will never play for the Flyers. Emil Andre now total 6 points in 11 games. That probably will continue to go up until he gets to the NHL. Noah Powell recently left. This is actually a piece of news. Recently left the NCAA. He had 5 points in 17 games. He is now with the Oshawa Generals in the OHL. So the Flyers will have to keep an eye on him and look to get him signed if they want to continue holding on to him. They won't have the luxury of the. Oh, actually,
NCAA
yes, they.
rule.
Yeah, actually, how will that work? I'm not sure how that
Um,
works now. I
so I
forget
mean, I think they'll have to
when
give
they
him like
leave.
I'll have to give him like I believe an entry level contract at some point. I don't know what the date is. There'll be some sort of date or some sort
Yeah,
of like cutoff where they need to sign him, or they'll lose the rights based on his age. So
yeah.
we'll just have to see. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head.
I imagine it's because he doesn't want to play a checking role, which is what he was
Yeah,
doing
and
at
I
Ohio
mean,
State.
NCAA is a tougher league, so ultimately we'll see it. But OHL's more conducive to scoring, so maybe
And he
that helps with
knows,
his offensive
again, yeah,
aspects. Yeah.
he's a scorer. So he does have one assist in his first game with the Generals. So we're going to keep an eye on him and see how he does. But I think it's actually potentially a smart move for him for his career. Adam Yinning, 4 points in 36 games. Again, he's still signed beyond this year, but I would not be surprised if he goes back to Sweden at the end of this year and a contract opens up because that was rumored last year, and it doesn't look like he's going to get another chance at the NHL with this type of performance. Ryan McPherson has 1 goal, 1 assist in 9 games, 2 points. Ty Murchison, 1 assist in 20 games for Arizona State University. And goaltending wise, Matej Tomek leads the entire crop with very impressive numbers. Actually, in 15 games, he has a 1.92 goals against and a .931 save percentage. He's a long term project here. I do not think he'll ever make his way over to North America, but interesting that at least he's doing well in the Czech league. Igor Zavragin, the icing on the cake of all of the prospects, most likely at this point, outside of Luchenko, Bonk, and Barkey. But Zavragin still doing well. He is kind of jumping into games as well, but in 19 games for SKA, he has a 2.67 goals against and a .911 save percentage with 2 shutouts. He's 10-6. Overall in the season, he's a 2.56 goals against and a .920 with 3 shutouts, being 13-9. And again, he played 6 games for Sochi prior to coming over to SKA. Carson Bjarnason in 17 games. He has a 3.08 goals against average, but a .909 save percentage. He's 8-7-2. Again, his team is not very good, but his numbers are drastically improved over his previous numbers. And then Cal Peterson, still with mediocre numbers, 22 games in the AHL. That would be less if Makaniemi was playing, but he's got a 3.27 goals against average and a .881 save percentage. So his NHL days are over, I would say. And I would imagine that after this season and that huge contract finally leaves the books here, he will probably either go play in Europe or go play in the ECHL because his numbers are not good for the AHL
Yeah,
level either.
not great for Peterson for sure.
Yeah. And Makaniemi and Kolosov have no real reason to read either of them. There's no updates for them at all. Okay, that's it for this week's show. Again, it's going to be a longer time till our next show. We might start recording Sundays. Vasili and I still need to figure out what the schedule is. I'll be 7 hours ahead, so it's until the end of February. So it's going to be a little weird with the schedule, but we will make it work. And we'll make sure that we still have an episode out every week. And Vasili and I will, if I have to wake up in the middle of the night or whatever, I'll do that. Cool. So that's it for us. Vasili, anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, just continue to check out flyersnittygritty.com, everybody. We have a lot of great content coming up daily with articles. I myself will have articles on the website as well. So just keep an eye out. Tons of great content on the website.
Awesome. Cool. And just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Share it out if you can as well. That's also a tremendous help to us. For the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow and a rating there as well. Again, this is the best way to support our show. If you are listening and you made it this far, please, 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 please do those things. It is the best way to drive the growth of our show, and we tremendously appreciate it. You guys have obviously done that, a lot of you. If you can continue to do it or do it more, it would be helpful. So thank you all so much for your support. It means everything to us. We've had some really nice comments as well from some people, like just really, really.
Yeah, super appreciative of just all, the support that the fans give us and everything, and just the listeners. We wouldn't be able to, do this weekly, run the website, get to go, down to games and cover games and drafts and things like that without the fans, listening and supporting us. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, well said, Vasili. And also shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Also, a shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. They will help facilitate the process between you and your insurance company. They will help you with your claims and make that process seamless for you. Again, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And a shout out to SportsSpider.com. Again, they are the aggregator of sports content, the NHL, the Flyers, everything that you want to pay attention to. It will all be in one place. Our stuff is pinned at the top, so you won't have a problem finding our stuff on there. And again, they only aggregate and bring you right to the geek content that you are looking for. So the sites that they aggregate, they are also getting credit for those views and those hits. They're just bringing it all into one place. Okay, thank you everybody for listening. This was a really fun episode, especially when we got to just talk about winning and winning in a big way. So suck it, little Willie G. And we'll end on that note. Thank you all for listening. We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.